Hello and welcome to this Friday Live with you this morning. I'm just jumping in and just making sure that this is sharing live. Yep, I can see that it is. I The last few weeks we've been chatting about behaviour, and as part of my Let's Talk About series, we were unpacking a perspective looking at kids' behaviour. And I'm moving on today to just share with you some questions that come in to me via my Facebook pages, via social media, emails from my website, and things like that, just to unpack some of the questions that I get more frequently. Perhaps they'll be of use to you, and talking a little bit about that. I'm also in doing that, I was sort of looking back at some questions that I've had come in and some common things that come up for families, was coming to the idea of what I want the next focus to be for these lives. And it was pretty obvious in terms of, and you'll hear a bit more about that today, but I'm going to do sort of a series of lives with a bit more of a focus specifically on anxiety, seeing a lot of the ones that come into me. Anxiety seems to be one of the most common kind of pressing concerns for parents and people caring for kids, whether that's teachers or other therapists, grandparents, all that kind of thing. So if that's something that resonates for you, or you've got specific questions around anxiety, around things that you've tried, around things that were working well but maybe might not be now, as your kid or teenager moves into a different phase or a different stage of their life. So definitely, if you're catching this as a replay, have a little bit of a think. Please chuck a comment in there or send me a direct message or an email with a specific thing that you might like a bit more information about, or like to hear explained in another kind of way. So again, if you're jumping on live today, please pop some questions in there. I'm happy to do my best to answer them. Otherwise, I'm going to just talk a bit about some of the common kinds of things that people do ask. So one of the main, I suppose, global kind of statement and question people often have is, how do I help my child or my teenager? So that's usually from a parent writing to me and explaining usually that anxiety is really big at the moment, and how do I help them? What can I do as a parent to help them, to guide them the best that I can? For sometimes parents will say that they've got maybe some therapy support involved already. For others, they're on wait lists, still looking for that right person, or perhaps they have somebody but they're not connecting very well, and so are kind of still feeling uncertain about how to support them the best they can. So I'll talk a little generally, I suppose, because this is not a specific situation. One of the things I suppose I'll first be thinking about is how to give support to parents. Is it makes a difference on the age of the child. So as parents know, kids move through all kinds of stages. They have all kinds of developmental needs. They have different activities that are taking up a lot of their energy, and they're quite different depending on their age and stage and ability and where they're at. So helping a parent support their child when they have a toddler is really different from if they have a 17 or an 18 or a 22-year-old child. The urge to help support your child is the same, and it's a strong desire, and parents want to do the best they can to support their young people. And anxiety can be present in kids, really, really young, all the way through to young adults, and adults, of course, as well. So those things are the same, but the ages and stages and the ways in which we might support those children are going to be quite different. So firstly, be thinking, obviously, whether you have a child, a young child, a middle-aged child, an older child, because that makes a difference in terms of the kinds of support that we'll be expecting. When we have young children, in lots of ways, parents have a lot more capacity, a lot more power and control, I suppose, to be providing safety, providing support. Sometimes we have a lot more people involved as well. So they might have kindergartens or childcare centres or grandparents or other people as well around. Some do and some don't. So a lot of the times in ways we'll be helping them, it won't be directly with the child. It might be in some ways, but a lot of the work can be done by us having an understanding of maybe what's going on for our child and sharing that information with the other adults that are around them. Kids at under the age of sort of 8, 7 have very varying ability to do any not self-reflection, but self kind of regulation. And so the burden, I suppose, of helping them with anxiety, we don't want to place more on them if we don't need to, because there's a lot that we can do around our children at this age that is going to be really, really helpful for them. So kids are still learning all about the social world. They're still developing language that helps them reflect on things like emotions or behaviors and things like that. So part of our role as parents and caregivers and educators is to be really observant, really understanding of triggers, of where they're at in their capacity to deal with stress. Because if we're seeing meltdowns, if we're seeing anxious behaviors, if we're seeing significant difficulty separating and moving into other domains of their life, like their schooling or their kindergarten, or going to a long a daycare or things like that, then it's telling us something about what is happening to their system, and they're under excess stress and anxiety as the result of that. Sometimes there's specific phobias and things that develop, specific triggers that develop that are hard to resolve, but often if there's more generalized anxiety, it's about this overall overwhelm that's kind of happening, so their system's just not able to cope kind of with that. So a lot of the work will be done in terms of understanding what they look like when they're coping really, really well, what do they look like when they're not stressed, and how we can very, very gently expand their ability to cope with more. But certainly thinking about how we can pull things back so that we can see them happy and engaged, we can see them thriving, rather than thinking they have to just get used to this kind of thing. So we don't want to be just continually overloading the system. And I suppose it's understanding what is causing stress to that system, what is causing them to be overwhelmed. Is this new behavior? Is this behavior been around for quite some time? Have expectations lifted around them, and they're finding that's really hard adjustment, or they're just not ready to. So what can we do to lower stress for them? What supports can we put in place for educating those who are around our child frequently, so that that child feels safe and supported? So a lot of the work that will be done with young children is also going to be about co-regulation. So it's not about expecting they're going to have emotion regulation skills yet, because that's still very much a work in progress. It's understanding what is happening to them, noticing the stress signs before they get big, and building in some really good relationships, working on the relationships that are already there, like yours with your child, if that's the case, kindergarten teacher with your child, daycare with your child, really helping them to understand that the best thing they can do when they start to see signs of dysregulation or see signs of anxiety is to build a safe relationship with them. Let them know that you are there for them, that you understand them, that they can come to you, that you can remove some of the stresses that are happening because they're communicating that it's too much, it's too overwhelming. So, and again, that can be challenging in terms of knowing what the right amount to put demands on kids and to pull back, because there can be really different ideas around about whether that's the right thing to do for kids, and that perhaps we should just push through and they'll get used to it and that'll make them stronger and things like that. So there's some really unhelpful beliefs that are kind of widely and deeply embedded in the community and in society. So part of that is having a really strong understanding yourself. If you're advocating for your child, or if you've got a therapy team that can help you with that as well, and educating those other people around your child to say, this is what my child needs. This is signs that they are not coping. And when we see that, these kinds of things are going to be most helpful for them. So it's really having a good understanding of what anxiety is, what it means, what's happening to their nervous system. So one of the really important things, if we want our kids to learn, what are the things we want them to learn? We want them to learn that adults that care about them are their safe people. We also want them to not be trying to learn new skills in a state of stress. We know that when our bodies are stressed, our thinking capacity is reduced. We're moving into more survival kind of states, and our access to embedding memory is poorer than when we're feeling connected, feeling supported, and feeling really alive and having fun as well. Kids need to be having fun to really learn, and play is a really important part of that. So so the other thing, I suppose, is thinking about, are there enough of the good things happening for this child if there's significant anxiety? So increasing those connection moments with their trusted people around them, increasing their fun time, because anxiety is draining and it's heavy and exhausting for their nervous system. So making sure we replenish those nervous systems with beautiful relationships, with lovely quality time, with enough sleep, enough rest, enough nutrition, that their bodies can feel, invigorated again, even if they're dealing with bouts of anxiety or anxiety triggers. So trying to balance that out so that we're really focusing on the stuff that we can change and we can increase. So that's again a mindset shift from just trying to put out spot fires, or to not just eliminate anxiety, but just respond after the anxious thing has happened. It's like going back to that prevention. How can we prevent some of the anxiety from happening? Sometimes we can and sometimes we can't. We understand that, but certainly we can go, right, we can add lots of positive things to it. Perhaps sometimes we forget that flip side of it, and thinking about all the good stuff that we can add to it. We can have lots of compassion for ourselves when it happens. We can have lots of empathy and compassion for a young person, because dealing with anxiety is a really uncomfortable and not a fun experience for them. So showing them lots of compassion for that, and helping them move through it. Let them know that you're there for them and that you'll get through it together, and that yes, anxiety is an uncomfortable emotion, but we come through the other side, and we'll come through the other side together each time. So thinking about those supports, thinking about how well and how confident you are as their parent or their main carer, to communicate your understanding of anxiety and your goals for supporting your child. And if you're not so clear on understanding it, and if you don't feel like you've got a good understanding of why it happens, what anxiety is, what happens to the body. Keep listening as we unpack anxiety a little bit more over the next couple of Fridays, or reach out and ask about some good resources that can be helpful. Or keep following me. I've got a resource bit that helps go through kind of anxiety in autistic kids and teens. It's got lots of different areas, I suppose, that can be quite useful. So yeah, it's a journey. And again, if you're early on that journey of really understanding anxiety and understanding how it can present in different kids, be patient and gentle with yourself as much as you're going to be patient and gentle with your child. So the other part that I wanted to chat a bit about is what happens when we've got older children and maybe teenagers and young adults that are having significant presentations of anxiety. Sometimes what can happen is, yes, there's more opportunity for them to be engaged either in therapy or to do more work on themselves. There's expectations of having and being able to teach emotion regulation skills. And sometimes there's frustration when you can see that's not being applied, and kind of going, how do I help them when they're not ready? Maybe they really desperately would benefit from learning some of that information, but they're too anxious perhaps to see a therapist, or they're too anxious to start that, or they're in total shutdown mode. They're totally kind of overwhelmed and are unable to either venture out the house or even to venture having a Zoom session or anything like that. That is a question that comes up a bit for parents when it just feels like you want so much for them and you know that things could be better, but their anxiety is stopping them from being able to kind of take that next step. So part of it is, I suppose, is thinking about the difference between what you want for your child and what your child or teenager or young adult wants for them. So, and that's, I suppose, one of the things we get to do and get to explore when we are in therapy with a child. You get to kind of have that space, and they get to have that space and go, what do you want? What do you want out of this? I know why mum and dad maybe brought you here, but what do you want? So if you're at that stage where you can't get your child or teenager or young adult to see anybody, part of that is even just giving them that space to say, these are my hopes and dreams and everything for you, but what do you want? Like, are you happy? Is this content? You know, have you got capacity to think, do you want it any different? I don't know whether conversations like that happen or are easy to have. But I think sometimes it helps to say, okay, I can't have my kids' dreams and their ideas and their goals are theirs, and this life is theirs. We can't live it for them. We can't push them to make choices that they're not ready to make themselves. And so it is being really respectful and acknowledging our own anxiety around wanting the best for our kids and wanting the best for them, but feeling like if we push them, we're one more thing that is on top of them, one more thing that perhaps might be causing anxiety and overwhelm for them. So being able to kind of separate your own desires for them, even if that's for their best intentions, versus what are their intentions and where are they content to sit with at the moment, and being able to have some conversation around that and saying, you know, this is my stuff, but I want to hear what you would like in an ideal world. If things weren't so hard, or if things became easier one day, what might that look like? And encouraging a bit of freeing up of and opening up some possibility and some ideas around that. Sometimes it's just too hard to give yourself permission to think about that. But I think it's important because hope kind of builds us on, and it takes us along to that next step. And we certainly don't want to lose sight of hope and hopefulness for change. But change is really scary. Change in and of itself, even when it's something that we desperately want. We want things to be different. We want our young person not to feel so closed in by anxiety or so cut off from experiences by their anxiety. But even contemplating the idea of that can be very, very, very terrifying, because it's unknown. Sometimes it's, whilst anxiety keeps people stuck, it can become very, very familiar as well. So contemplating the idea of things improving is still change, and change can still be very scary. So it's acknowledging that as well, that that process of getting help sometimes, or process of wanting our lives to be bigger and brighter and more beautiful, and, you know, get rid of some of that anxiety or manage that anxiety a little more, can be quite terrifying still. So whether that's parts of conversations that parents can entertain having, I think that's important. And I think definitely for our neurodivergent kids and teens, this idea that at a certain age or stage that they need to be or can be applying self-regulation or emotion regulation skills. Again, how, depending how much experience they've had, learning those and applying those really varies. But also just the fact that I think co-regulation probably needs to continue whilst we see signs of struggling with emotion regulation, struggling with managing strong feelings, say, of anxiety in particular. So what does that mean for you as a parent who might be listening to this? Is saying, okay, I need to be working on my regulation. So if we're doing co-regulation, which is when we're sharing our nervous system with somebody else, when we're being empathic and we're just helping them, and we're not matching their anxiety, we're trying to manage our own anxiety, trying to manage our own emotions, is we have to keep working on that skill, because living with kids who have high anxiety, anxiety is quite catching, whether you describe yourself as an anxious person or not. Being around anxious people a lot is really draining, because it can be a very catching kind of emotion. And so we need to be working on our own regulation frequently to keep our nervous systems nice and calm if we're going to be helpful and supportive of them, and a lot of self-care and a lot of compassion as a parent as well, because we can have expectations, especially societal expectations, about what your child or teenager or young adult should be doing and could be doing, if only fill in the gaps. I'm sure you've heard lots of advice over the years from well-meaning individuals and family and people about what you could just do to solve this situation that they might be observing from the outside. So being really aware of that pressure, aware of those the misunderstanding that often exists out there around anxiety, parenting, all of those things, and having space to with other parents as well that get it, and other parents, and for yourself to be like, I'm okay, I'm doing a wonderful job, or I'm doing the best job that I know how, and that's good enough right now, and one step in front of the other, and finding ways to kind of give yourself a pat on the back, to celebrate the things that are going well, because we can get very, very easily get focused on what's not going well when we're overwhelmed and feeling like there's never going to be a moment where we kind of say, hey, things are going really good, or I really love, you know, the position we're in at the moment, or my kids are thriving, or I feel like I'm a great mom or great parent, or whatever it might be. So if sometimes we can feel that those moments will never get there, and if we never find a way to focus on what we have going on for us right here, right now, it can feel like a very, very steep uphill battle, and also one that we then feel like we don't have the energy to take as well. So it's, again, finding ways to look after ourselves, especially if we have kids or teens or young adults that are not either engaging, or it feels like it's not moving you know, at a rate that perhaps we expect it would be, or that we're having some frustrating kind of experiences with their own growth in terms of understanding their own anxiety and being able to manage that. So that's just a couple of ideas about thinking about what happens and how can you help your child when they're a young child versus maybe when they're a bit older. And the other thing I want us to be thinking about is not just what can I do to help my child, because so those are some tips in terms of thinking about support systems, thinking about support systems for yourself, because that's incredibly important and frequently overlooked in a lot of our mental health, medical education systems. Sometimes we create support systems around the client or the patient or the person, and overlook perhaps the importance of the support system needed for the family, and about who is really connecting in with the person who is leading and pushing and driving a lot of the change within a family or a family system. So that really needs to be looked at. And I think if parents don't put that as a priority, the systems tend not to do that. So I really encourage you to be thinking that that is a highly important part of the puzzle, or part of the journey as well, is not just focusing on help for the young person, because ultimately you and your family are going to be on this journey together a lot longer than whether you've got professionals in or out of the family, or whether you're engaged in or out of a school or a system. You guys are going to be together for life. And, so thinking about that is that investing in yourselves, you as a parent who's supporting your child or teenager, and by you working on your own regulation, your skills, your knowledge, that's an investment in your family forever, and will just compound over and over again in terms of the value for yourself, for your child, and that ripple effect that will happen from that. So when we're thinking about what can I do, also another question is there anything that I'm not willing to do? I suppose, like, what is it that, how willing are you to do what needs to be done to support your child? Sometimes having kids with specific anxieties, specific difficulties, they ask us to do things that we would never have expected, that we would never have thought we would need to do. We may kind of go, okay, maybe I'll get some help, or I'll see if they can see a counselor, or see if we can link them in somewhere. And if that's not happening, that's not enough, I suppose the thing is, what more am I willing to do? How far am I willing to go? And that's a question that only you can answer, in terms of what won't you do for your child? And sometimes it's, for lots of families and things that we see when we see change happening, it's changing systems, it's creating new programs, it's, the most amazing things have come from when people say, I looked for this and it wasn't there, and so I had to go out and invent it. Or I knew that I needed this and it wasn't there. So they kind of become what needs to be there sometimes, and that's incredible when that happens. And I suppose what it also does, it gets us questioning how things have always been done. We know that the systems that are in place currently are far from perfect. The demand, I suppose, that it puts on families at times is crazy. It's ridiculous, and it's not fair. And we can be stuck in that moment of, well, there isn't help, there isn't enough support, all those sorts of things. And all of those things could be true and are true in a frame. However, I suppose the flip side is what else can I do? What else am I prepared to do? How far am I prepared to push to create the supports, whether that's the supports that I need, the understanding that I need around my child, or in terms of saying, I don't understand enough, or I need to learn more. How am I going to have that knowledge so then I can advocate for them? And I know we're in a society where we're kind of, it's almost like information overload. There's so much information out there. So the hardest part now, I think, is to be discerning, is to be picky about what kind of information you resonate with, what kind of people you resonate with, so that you kind of go, right, I'm going to hone in on that, I'm going to zone in on that information, and use that to kind of fuel me and guide me until maybe the next step of my journey, and find something else. So the hardest part is there's so much information, sometimes that's overwhelming, but I implore you to find people, find information, find that passion for creating something for your child, because they're the most important person to you. I know that. So it's coming back to feeling fueled, feeling energized, and saying, this is so important to me. They are so important to me. There's nothing I won't do. And finding the energy when you felt like you don't have any, to push through barriers, to push through old, outdated understanding of what autistic means, what neurodivergent means, what support for anxiety disorders means, and how we can do that. So, and again, it's finding that support around you as well. So find communities that resonate in a way that provides energy, because it can be, like I said, anxiety can be very catching, it can be very overwhelming, and sometimes it can be really disheartening if we look around at all the barriers or all the things that makes it challenging to support our children or teenagers or young adults. So definitely keep an eye on hope, keep an eye that our visions for what we want for our kids and teens has that capacity to pull us forward towards them. So certainly revisit them, take a moment to be thinking about what you want that to kind of look like. And if you've got a child or teenager that you can chat to about that, have a moment to ask them, if anxiety wasn't as big, it wasn't around as much, or if it was a bit smaller, or if it was here a bit less, or if you felt like you had some skills to kind of see it, but not have it take fun things away from us, what would life look like? What can you imagine you'd be able to do, or things like that. So that can be tricky kind of questions sometimes, but if they can't answer them, certainly think about what that means for you. So anyway, so I'm going to leave it today. I hope if you're watching this on replay, this has been helpful or useful in some way. And I think what I'll do is I'll have a look at my calendar, but over the next 3 or 4 or 5 weeks, I might develop a bit of a series where I break down in a bit more detail about anxiety and the different components that might be useful for you, that you can probably use to apply to your specific situation. Again, this is just, general education advice. So, coaching, if we're doing group coaching or doing one-on-one coaching, that can get a whole lot more specific, and therapy is different again. So it's in a one-on-one therapy kind of template, and it's a very different situation. So take from this, it's general advice. If you've got any questions specifically about resources or other ideas, please pop a comment and ask me. Otherwise, we haven't started our Glimmer group yet. So if you are a parent of a child or a teenager or a young adult and has been recently diagnosed, or you're looking to have your child diagnosed or identified as autistic, or you're wondering if that's the case or not, and you're looking for a group of parents who you might like to be part of while we unpack that, please reach out and find out about when we start that, which will be really, really soon. We've got a small group already convened. We're just about to kick off our date for that. So I'll pop that in the comments if you're watching, or just reach out with any questions. All right, have an amazing Friday. In Victoria, it's the beginning of the Vic School holidays. New South Wales, you have another week to go, and so is Australia, I think. So if you're starting your school holidays, have a lovely, safe time. Please travel safe if you're going on the roads. And I will catch you probably next Friday, but if not, I'll let you know, or I'll jump in during the week because I've got next week off from the practice. So I'll spend a bit of time with my kids. Okay, I'm going to go. Take care. I'll talk with you soon. Bye.